In Boston, they used to have this place called the Combat Zone. It was this section where they had all types of illegal crime and just a lot of weird stuff going on. But is this something that was ever gonna work, or was this always just destined for failure? Before they had the Combat Zone, they had Scully Square. This was a spot where they actually eventually had it shut down and even burnt down due to this raid that happened, where they got to see that there was people of power that were going to these shows. Actually, we'll do a full video on that as well, so if you're interested in that, definitely check that out. But let's go back to the beginning. Why would they even allow something like this? Why was this even something that they tried to try out in the first place? The reason why is because this was the golden age of porn. So what they were doing was trying to keep it in one general area. They were trying to keep it out of the suburbs, keep it away from the suburban kids, and they wanted to put it in an area where they could somewhat control it. This area today looks nothing like it used to, and let me show you what it actually used to look like. As you can see, it is a complete difference from what it looks like now, and this is very interesting due to the fact that obviously this was a failed experiment that somewhat was possible to work. As we see in Amsterdam, they have the so-called red light district, where that was mainly only popular due to them allowing cannabis, and they had very similar stuff as well. But the prostitution and stuff along those lines that was happening in the Combat Zone was the reason for the downfall. With that said, though, why is it even called the Combat Zone? Is it a area that was actually where they used to have wars, or was this just a weird name that someone gave it?
And little clubs around there. And the Navy men used to come and drink there, and they'd get into fights. And some judge, I think it was like in like 1958 or early 1960, called it the Combat Zone. And I think the Herald, which then was like the Herald Traveler, or maybe it was it was the precursor to today's Herald, or one of them, they did a a takeout, which we call in journalism a takeout, which is like a long piece on the place and how it was getting, crime infested and everything. And they called it the combat zone. And that was like, I think in 62, that piece ran. And then forevermore, it was the combat zone.
This is actually a name that a judge gave it. A judge gave it this name because people were having a lot of fights at this area. Of course, the fights and all of that stuff would continue. It just is part of the whole game. But there was a point where there was an overflow of the streets where it was literally just backed up and it was chaos. So this was something that they had to eventually control. There was other reasons for them to eventually shut it down and stop it overall, but the overflow and backup of cars was something that actually was bringing in a lot of financial benefits for the city. So even though it was something that was bad, it had a yin and a yang to it. It had positives as well.
Strip joints. I used to work, you remember the combat zone in Boston?
Sure, yeah.
I used to work all those strip joints. I remember I teamed up with two strippers, Lily Pagan and Inita Mann. That was her name. And they were like 40 years old. And they weren't prostitutes. They were working class women, big Boston women with short hair that would wear wigs. And we would drive out to Fort Devens to do a show for the soldiers. They'd be there with drills and then, power tools. And she'd put together this what do you call that? Clear plastic. They have plexiglass bathtub. And she would take a bath, like a stripper, and so and they were tough women. And I was like 19 and they were like 40. And one day we're out there doing a show, and she's in the bathtub, doing those kind of stuff. And I'm on stage just telling jokes and so-and-so. And some guy just starts heckling me. And I remember she gets out of the bathtub, walks over, grabs the guy by the neck, punches him in the face, breaks the guy's nose. The guy goes down. The crowd is cheering. She goes, "You leave the kid alone." And then she gets back in the tub and starts doing all the gyrations. I mean, it was hilarious. It was hilarious.
Wow.
Oh, it was a great time. And they were really nice women. They weren't hookers. These are women that back then, being a typist or a secretary, that's really what was available to you as a woman if you were not a college-educated woman, or a waitress or something like that. So that's what they did. They had the car with their, stripper insignia on the side. I need a man, and a kind of a dolled-up picture of themselves painted on the fender. And we'd just drive around, and I would MC and introduce the girls, and they would come out and do their act. But they were very protective of me because I was like a kid.
Wow.
So, it was really fun.
And that's why they tried to control it. That's why they actually tried to continue to keep it going. And the state actually was saying that they were going to police it. They said that they were going to help keep it secure, but they didn't do that. It was during a very tough period, and it seemed as if they wanted to fund the suburban areas a lot more than they wanted to fund that specific area. But what does this mean? Did they just allow people to run loose and just do whatever? Not really. They kind of have some control over it, but it was loose to the extent where people were going in and somewhat doing whatever. There was a lot of funny but odd stories that you can hear from people that are older. If you go to a bar in Boston, you definitely get a funny story out of most people about this area. But was it a spot that had any potential of lasting? I would say so. I would say in Amsterdam, as we see, the red light district is definitely much more secured than it would be over here in this so-called combat zone. But this was definitely a flawed system where it was definitely set up to somewhat fail. So the way that they had it set up, no, it would have never lasted. But as we see, it caused some very, very funny but also bad stories. The real reason why it eventually shut down was because after a Harvard football game. It was their final game, and they went to one of the places on that street and ended very badly. So, of course, there is a lot of people that have already told that story. I can pull up a clip right now.
You know, Leon Easterling stabbed Andy Popolo not once, but twice when he was in retreat. Edward Soros was in a fist fight with him up until, and by one witness's account, after he got stabbed. That part's debatable, but there is some witness testimony. Richard Allen is just standing there, not hitting anybody. There is some testimony that he's saying, "Go home, Harvard boys, go home, get out of here, don't do this." So Henry Owens really thinks that, first off, that he shouldn't even be tried with the other two because there's so much evidence against the other two. And second, that, he's not going to get a fair trial because of the judge and because he doesn't think the other two have such great representation. So the other two lawyers are Wallace Sherwood, who is a young Black attorney who's up for a judgeship. But he's very quiet. He leaves after this case. He goes into academia. So during the trial, the judge is always telling Henry Owens to lower his voice and shut up, and he's always telling Wallace Sherwood to raise your voice. We can't hear you. So, and then the other Walter Hurley, who was representing Soros, was actually up for a judgeship at the time. So there's speculation that he didn't want to rock the boat too much because the state wanted this case. The state really wanted this case because the Suffolk County they wanted to put an end.
If you enjoyed this video today and want to see more videos that are based upon things that happened in Massachusetts or just places on the East Coast, then you'll definitely want to subscribe to this channel. But I'm also going to be doing a lot of different documentaries about cannabis related stuff and martial arts related, boxing, and stuff along those lines. I think you definitely are going to be interested in a lot of the content that we have coming in the near future. So I'd say subscribing is the best thing to do. With that said, if you enjoyed this video today, definitely hit that like button. I definitely appreciate the fact that you made it all the way to the end. So much love and respect.